Logic Pro for iPad has been out for a year now. And for 1 week, we've had the brand new Logic Pro for iPad 2 with a whole bunch of cool new features. So in this week's podcast, we're taking a look back, a look at the present, and a look forward into what is in store for Logic Pro for iPad. But I'm not going to go it alone because I'm bringing in my partner in crime, the one, the only, Patrick from the Logic Pro Guide. I still can't get used to saying the Logic Pro Guide. Is that correct? Logic Pro Guide, mate?
Yeah, I mean, there's only one pronunciation for this one, which keeps things nice and easy, unlike the GarageBand guide.
So. Going to be really boring. We can't say GarageBand and GarageBand for the next however long we talk about. Welcome aboard, mate. The GarageBand guide and the Logic Pro guide both going great guns, and you've been putting out content left, right, and centre about both GarageBand and Logic Pro. How have you been finding the Logic Pro for iPad 2 launch that came, I don't know, out of nowhere?
Out of the blue. First of all, thanks a lot for having me, Pete. I really appreciate it. It's always great to chat to you and geek out about this stuff. Yeah, completely out of the blue, a shock to everyone, us included. Yeah, it was just crazy. So yeah, I mean, in typical Apple style, they kind of develop all this stuff behind the scenes and then throw it all at you, and then set the internet ablaze for a week before it's released.
Yeah, well, that was the weird thing this time around, wasn't it? Because we had that week period, and full disclosure, we will discuss this. It's on my list of things to chat about, but we had a wee bit of early access. I'm already talking like it. We had a little bit of early access to Logic Pro for iPad 2, so we got to test out and check out some of these new features beforehand, just so that we could, help folks out there out with all of the new changes. But I remember hearing about it and going, this is unprecedented, because how long has it been with GarageBand that we've had the .1 and then the .1.1 and then the .1.12, 13, 14, 15? We haven't had a full GarageBand version update in, 6 years? And yet Logic Pro, 1 year in, bang, there it is. Crazy.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask you, we've got sort of 10 talking points here today. By the way, this is the Logic Pro. This is the Studio Live Today podcast. My name is Pete Johns. We got Patrick here from the GarageBand Guide and the Logic Pro Guide. Links in the description if you want to find out how to get in touch with Patrick and check out all of his great content down there. And we would appreciate all the usual stuff, the thumbs up, the dinging of the buttons and the bells and all that sort of stuff. But welcome aboard. I'm going to ask you the question on everyone's lips, and that's, Patrick, why is the Logic Pro version on iPad? So it's going to happen every time, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Why is Logic Pro for iPad not exactly like Logic Pro for Mac? Go.
Because they didn't want to make it. I don't know. I'm really glad it isn't.
Yes,
I think we have talked before several times when we both said that Logic Pro was definitely never coming to iPad. Idiots.
Who would say that?
I know, honestly. But I think we talked a bit about because I think people were thinking a port of the Mac version would be what would end up on iPad, and I'm really glad that isn't the case. I'm glad it's its own thing. I'm glad it was kind of built around touch. And while there maybe isn't feature parity, I know we'll talk about that a bit later on as well, I think they absolutely made the best decision to make it its own self-contained thing as opposed to just a port of the Mac version.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, look, I agree, and I think last time you were on the show, we talked about exactly that when we were talking Logic Pro for iPad 1.1 as it was then, and we said the same thing, that it is not, and I think that's been the disappointment for some folks, where they're like, oh, this is just going to be Logic Pro for Mac, but it's on my iPad, and if you've used Logic Pro for Mac, which I have somewhat, you don't want to be clicking around and being using that interface on a touch screen, especially if it was a 10 or 11 inch touch screen. I think you would go insane doing that. So redesigning and redeveloping it for the touchscreen was definitely the way to go. But that hasn't stopped some folks being a little bit less than happy with the fact that it doesn't emulate all the Logic Pro for Mac features. Is that right?
I haven't noticed that, Pete. Is that something? Where have you seen this?
Just getting this vibe, this general vibe from folks that maybe they wished that it was.
Weird thing, isn't it? Like, Apple are terrible at setting expectations, because obviously we obviously have experience with a little bit with what goes on behind the scenes when they create apps like this. And I guess the Apple marketing machine gets in the way, and they want to kind of promote it in a certain way, and what people should actually expect kind of gets lost in the all the marketing speak and hype that Apple put out there. So I remember kind of before the first version of Logic was launched, nobody really knew what they were going to get. Apple didn't say this is what you're getting. They kind of talked about some cool features and stuff. The same way with Logic Pro for iPad 2, they talked about the headline features, but never really kind of set any expectations along with that. And I think that kind of leaves the door open for people to kind of maybe get the wrong end of the stick quite often.
Yeah, it is hard. And look, I get it. I mean, you and I have both worked in the corporate world, and it's not like Apple are going to come out and go, this is Logic Pro, but it's not really got all those same pro features you're probably looking for from the Mac version. It's actually a bit of a cut down version because you're not going to have your proper flex pitch and fletch time that you're used to in your Mac version because we didn't think we could actually implement that in the iPad. So, yeah, it's not going to be that, but I don't know. And I guess it depends. We can wax lyrical about your definition of what a pro and a professional actually is, and whether they should be using the word pro in Logic Pro. And is it just GarageBand Pro really? Because it's just GarageBand with a coat of paint on it. Yeah, there's lots of ways you can go with that, but I think, I think that I like to say, and I was talking about this on the show this week, that the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive, as it has with Logic Pro 1 and Logic Pro 1.1 for iPad. A lot of people are very happy, and then there's the very vocal minority who are extremely unhappy about various things, which we will talk about and delve into as we continue on with the show today.
Yes.
So new features. We've got a bunch of cool new stuff. You've covered a lot of it over on your channel, and again, there'll be links down below that folks can go and check all that out. As we've got the session players, we've got drummer, we've got bass, we've got keys, we've got the chords track, we've got the stem splitter, and we've got the new Chroma Glow plugin. What's been your favourite so far out of all of these? What is the one thing that when you saw it, you're like, aha, this is where we're at. This is going to be the big difference maker that I am going to use and that I love.
I think the most surprising and the thing I probably had the most fun with was the stem splitter. I think most people kind of say that. I mean, if you look at, not kind of putting them down or anything, the session players are kind of evolutions of what we already had with the drummer. The stem splitter is completely new. Something that we've never seen before from Apple in any of Apple's DAWs. And it's just, I think the fact that it works so well was quite surprising. I don't know if you've had experience with kind of stem separation software in the past, but sometimes it's good and sometimes it's a bit crap. Apple's implementation of it in Logic on iPad and on Mac as well is just absolutely fantastic. I don't know what kind of AI nonsense they've got going on behind the scenes, but it certainly seems to make things sound really good. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't the first thing I opened up when we got early access to that beta version, but it was certainly one of the first things. And yeah, I sat for hours just importing different. I wonder what it would do to this. I wonder what it would do to this track. And then like kind of progressively finding worse recorded songs, like my own songs from years ago and band songs from decades ago, and shoving them into the iPad using Stem Splitter and seeing what it does. So for me, that's absolutely the thing that was most exciting and most fun. I think because it's new.
Yeah.
New.
And I think you're right. I think that it was both great and terrible that was one of the new features because it was so much fun. And I know I've played with these. There's like been online versions of them and apps that do the same sort of thing for a long time now. And there's even like an open source algorithm that does it. But I wanted to say, what is Apple's version of this? And is it actually going to live up to the hype that they put out there? Because they made it sound like it was going to be some sort of magic voodoo. And it's not that it did it. Not that it does it perfectly every time, but my goodness, does it do a pretty good job on 99% of things you throw at it. And even when it doesn't do a fabulous job on every track, you're like, it's still pretty good. I must admit it was a lot of fun to play with that. And it's weird because, and we'll talk about it a bit later because I'm wondering whether it's going to have the longevity. Is it going to be a flash in the pan novelty thing, or will people actually use it for real music creation? Because again, those forums and those groups that we definitely don't hang out on, there's definitely not people there that seem to spend more time bug finding and fault finding than they do actually creating music. So we definitely won't be talking about that later. So how was it, mate? We were very lucky, and again, we're very privileged. Just for full disclosure, both Patrick and myself got early access from Apple. Apple don't vet anything that we do with this. They don't vet anything that we say. They're not controlling this conversation as much as people think that there's little strings and we're little Apple puppets sometimes. It's not the case, but they do come to us when they have something like this because they know we are giant GarageBand and Logic Pro geeks. So they're going to get us talking about the new features, and if they give us early access, then those new features are going to get a lot of coverage immediately as soon as they are released there. So how was your experience? Obviously, we can't disclose all the information, all the top secret stuff, but how was your experience this time around with the period of time when you knew stuff and that you knew everyone wanted to know, but you couldn't say anything?
I mean, like, it's a blessing and a curse. And just with that whole, like, we're geeks thing, we can't talk too much about it because they ask us not to, but certainly the people I spoke to at Apple are just massive geeks as well. I don't know if people have this idea that the people, the Apple music creation team is like a giant group of thousands of people there. It's like three guys who are like just the geeky, like lovely, but like the same level of geekiness as I would say I am about music and music production. Obviously with quite a bit more knowledge about it. But yeah, see, it's a blessing and a curse having that early access, because it's great because from a content creation point of view, you've got a head start. You can dive in and gain an understanding of the app that will allow you to create videos and tutorials around it for the launch, which is fantastic from a business standpoint, I would say. From kind of, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, and I certainly don't want to blow yours on camera anyway, Pete. But as kind of the part of a community who maybe looks to you for opinion or tutorials or guidance about this kind of thing, knowing that kind of stuff and not being able to share it, especially when there's that kind of time period, that week where it's all anybody is talking about, you have information about it and you can't share it, it's torture. It's absolute bloody torture. And like you say, that's the great thing. Obviously, we chatted quite a bit back and forth, and that was just a lifesaver, being able to talk to someone else about this kind of stuff who, as we said off camera, our wives couldn't really care at all. And kids are just kind of staring at us blankly.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's an absolute double-edged sword, because I'm terrible. I learned over this time, I think I mentioned to you, I'd make an absolutely horrible politician because I would be a horrific liar. I can't keep a straight face, to the point where I was doing live shows and I wouldn't even put my iPad on the screen because I had these fantasies, these flashes of, oh my God, I'm going to put my iPad on the screen and there's going to be a Logic Pro icon there and I'm going to accidentally tap it and then it's going to open up Stem Splitter and everyone's going to go, oh, he does have it and that's how it works. Oh my God, we've revealed all the secrets. So it was a nerve-wracking week, to be sure. And I'm pretty sure we said exactly the same things last time around, and unfortunately, it is what it is. But it was good to be able to get that head start. It is tricky though, because what a lot of people don't know is we don't have the user guide. We have some very basic. We have the lessons that you can use in Logic Pro for iPad, and we have some very basic sort of early documentation. Like they haven't even finished the user guide by the time they hand it over to us. So and again, it's if we talk about any more than this, then we'll be in trouble. So we're going to keep moving. The session players. Let's talk about those, because the session players have got a lot of attention. We've had Drummer for the longest time in both GarageBand and Logic Pro, both on the Mac version of the iPad. By the way, I kind of buried the lead. This is on Mac too. And I know there's many Mac users out there. You get the same stuff. And how nice, can we get a hallelujah, Hail Mary, a round of applause for the fact that the Mac and the iPad versions of GarageBand and Logic Pro are finally starting to align? Has that been a bugbear of yours for a while, Patrick, perhaps? I
mean, it's a bugbear of many people in forums across the internet, it seems to be. But I think it is. It's a fantastic... The good thing about this, obviously, they launched this at an iPad event, and it was great to see all of the kind of the marketing images and videos. It was all the iPad. It was really interesting as well to see a lot of Mac Logic YouTubers having to use images of Logic on an iPad on their
Yeah.
thumbnails because that's all there was. So I mean, it's really good. Not just good for Logic on iPad to get its moment in the sun, as it were, but it's good that they're kind of all in on having things launch at the same time and having the two versions kind of be maybe not equal, but as equal as they can be as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great point actually, because for many years it's been the poor step cousin of the Mac versions when it's come to GarageBand and iPad, and the fact that iPads now have the M4 processor in them as opposed to the M3, which is the highest processor on a Mac. So the iPad has the best processor, and now it's kind of leading with the new software, including Final Cut and Logic Pro, which yeah, it's a bit weird when you think about it. When you think back to Final Cut and Logic Pro being the flagship Pro products for the Mac, which had the flagship chip in their Mac Pros, and now, yeah, I mean, I know an M3 Ultra or an M2 Ultra and a Mac Pro is still going to be crushing an M4, which is
Yeah.
another story for another day that we don't need to go into here today. But Apple's naming conventions aside, it is pretty cool to be able to see that. So session players, mate, the keys and the bass and the drummer, the update to drummer. How have you been finding these? Been playing with them? And the question, I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, these are cheating because this is it's gonna rip work away from real working session musicians, and people are just going to replace every player on every album with these AI session players." Is that all hype, or is that going to happen? What do you reckon?
I mean, it's totally true. I just sacked my session bassist and session keyboardist that I hire to add tracks to the nonsense I make on a Sunday night as well. Nonsense, absolute nonsense. No, I don't think so. I mean, we had like you say, we had the drummer in GarageBand and Logic for years, and nobody called that cheating. It's been one of the best features in GarageBand and Logic Pro, and it has been known as that for ages. So I don't know if people's problem with these is Apple have now called them AI, and then of course I don't think they're not AI though, right? I mean, it's algorithmic and it's like machine learning, but it's not like making it up on the spot, right?
Well, that's what I can't really. I'm wondering if AI has just been a label that they've placed on them because AI is going on everything, or
Yeah.
could you argue that that drummer's always been AI? But and I mean, yeah, we can get into a whole AI discussion as well. But I always think that AI is just human-led automation. It's just a human saying,
Yeah.
"Please do these things for me," and programming it in. Isn't that what like the prompt engineering and everything with ChatGPT is now anyway?
Yeah.
So I think it's always been that with drummer. You've said play a rock beat on a hi-hat in 4/4 time and make it a bit complex and slightly less intense. And then the drummer, the AI drummer goes and does it. Well, now we've got that for a bass player and a keys player that does the same thing. And I don't know, I guess the one thing is that the perform again function. I don't know if you've played around with that much, but the little arrow that just says,
Yeah.
try it again. That to me is the magic of the AI, because before you just tweak it and eventually you go, Kyle's basically got 10 things that he plays. Like at the end of the day, Kyle just plays these 10 different patterns, and it's like you just keep pushing the slider up and down until Kyle plays the pattern you want. Whereas now it'd be interesting, and someone smarter and nerdier than even us should play around with that and go, how many? Like, what is the limitation? Because AI by its very nature, you'd say, well, it should be almost limitless and infinite in terms of the possibilities. But if
Yeah.
you just kept changing it, like, are there 100, 1,000, a million variations of all of these patterns, or will you hit a wall where it just says actually Apple just programmed in 200, and they just hope you don't notice that that's the limit?
Yeah, and then how many times can you hit that button until you get the same thing again? Oh, well, that's my afternoon ruined, Pete. That's what I'm going to be doing. Thanks.
There you go, the next Logic Pro guide. Welcome to this 4-hour Logic Pro guide video
Pressing a
where we'll
button.
be pressing a button for 4 hours and logging exactly which hits on which snare and which hi-hat go in. But yeah, look, I do think, to your point before, yeah, like we don't have... You either don't have those session musicians anyway on your employ, so they're not, these fictional people are not getting sacked for us to use AI or not AI or automated or whatever you want to call it, or you are, and I don't know that you're getting. I don't know that anyone that's producing that's got $1 million record that they're about to put out is going to go. I could be using Flea to play this bass line, but I don't know. That slap bass is pretty good. It's pretty close to Flea, so maybe Flea gets the arse. I don't know, but yeah, the way I put it out is that I think that the people that like right now, like you and me, we're going to use this, but we were using other stuff anyway. We were using automated or samples or loops or whatever before, or playing in very poor bass. In my case, if you try hard, or you're producing music where you're actually using players. So, and then those people, they may benefit from this because they can actually write songs. I think from the songwriting point of view, these are actually going to be pretty good tools because folks are going to be able to get an idea. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's different to what you maybe would program in yourself. And I think that's what's cool about them. It's like asking a friend, but it just happens to be a special robot friend that lives inside Logic.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to Apple's marketing. Lots of video footage of producers in big studios with massive multi-$1,000 computers with an iPad in their hand. It's home recording musicians that are going to be using this, who, like you say, won't have access to a keyboardist and a bassist. And if you're creating demos or just want to create your own music, having that extra kind of person that's going to play along something, especially if, like me, you're rubbish at the keyboard or the bass like yourself, then yeah, having that kind of additional session player is going to be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and
not a bad
yeah, when I was doing my tutorial, I said very clearly that it's already better than me. Like I dialed it as soon as I got past that first notch of complexity. I'm like, oh no, they can do those like little mute bits on the bass, and the keyboard
Yeah,
player
yeah.
can play the little grace notes and things. And I'm like, okay, I'm officially replaced because mine is just plonk. I can plonk a patch or a pad underneath something, but as soon as it gets more complicated than that, and you have to hit multiple keys within a 4 bar range, I'm done. So yeah,
Which is good. I mean, it's quite liberating as a musician who does a lot by himself, recording. I don't know if very much the same. Yeah, it takes the pressure off having to try to be good at that stuff that you're not very
yeah,
good at, and you can focus on your vocal performance or your guitar performance instead of having to worry about, oh God, I'm going to have to try and play a decent bass line to this. Yeah, so from that
perfect.
standpoint, it's great. Yeah.
It is great. So yes, look, I'm sure. And by the way, if you are watching this or you're listening to the audio version of this and you disagree with us, what is it, Patrick at thegaragebandguide.com? That's the way you can direct it. No. You
Every
can
time,
leave
Pete, every
comments
time.
every time without fail. I'm nothing if not very predictable and throw out the lame dad jokes wherever I can. You talked about Stem Splitter. In fact, if I recall, you named it as your favorite new feature in
Yes.
Logic Pro for iPad 2. Is it going to be useful, Patrick? Is it a novelty act? Is it just something that people are going to, like you and me, are going to play with for 7 hours? We're going to throw every little bit of music we have at it and go, wow, it does so good, and then never use it again? Or do you see it as an actual tool for music creation?
I think it depends, really. For someone like myself who doesn't really work, who wouldn't call themselves a producer as such and doesn't do a lot of remixing, yeah, it's a nice novelty. It'll be useful to use now and again, but I probably won't be using it or incorporating it as part of my daily workflow. Whereas if you're a producer who uses their iPad to remix songs or chop stuff up, if you're into kind of crate digging, so if you're into like try to find different samples from different songs and taking bits out and putting it all back together again, then yeah, I mean, this is going to negate the need to have a kind of subscription to a third-party app or a web-based solution that you were maybe using previously. It's all in-app in the one program. So yeah, I mean, from that, if you are one of those, then yeah, I think you'll find this definitely useful going forward. What do you
Yeah.
reckon? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I'm actually really surprised. No one's really talked. Well, people are probably talking about everything, but I haven't seen as big of an uproar about this. But I'm very surprised at Apple, being the conservative, copyright cautious company that they are, have now given us a tool to be able to rip samples out of anything we like, including commercial recordings, because I don't know. I think that it's different to what we've seen from Apple in the past. Not that it's bad by any stretch, because I think it's a really good thing, and I think people will use it for the right things. But it is very strange that, considering even something like an MP3 converter in the App Store has often been pulled down because of potential problems, and Apple block HDMI output from your iPad so that you can't, do horrible things like try to make tutorials on Logic Pro and GarageBand by streaming those to your Mac. To me that was a little bit weird that they did it, but I don't know. I think part of it was a bit of an AI flex. It was that we have this technology, we have this tool, and we want to show people that we can do cool things. And I kind of saw that they had the Apple Music thing where you could do the karaoke style, where you could remove the vocals. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like this in a future version. I think you and I both saw that they also added that little vocal removal plugin into GarageBand that just popped out of nowhere. And I thought, yeah, there's something going on here. They're developing algorithms that are going to be able to do some cool stuff here. So, yeah, that's my only surprise. But like I said, for remixers, for producers, I think it's going to be amazing. And I mean, by the way, I say all that as devil's advocate because I'm actually a massive fan of remixing. I think that people get way too over the top with copyright, and as someone that works in YouTube, and as well, is like the whole content ID and copyright and everything is a giant challenge. But I want to see people just chop stuff up and make cool stuff. Really,
they can.
Yeah, and now they can
for $5 a month.
For $5 a month. Now, we were going to talk about this later, but you've raised it now, so we're going to talk about it now, and that is subscriptions. So subscriptions, I know a lot of people are screaming at their screens right now going, Pete, Patrick, you are promoting this product, but they use subscriptions, and subscriptions, as we all know, are evil, have always been evil, and always will be evil. So subscriptions, are they a necessary evil, or are they just plain evil, or are they a little from column A, a little from column B? What say you about the subscription plans for Logic?
Well, what would the alternative be, Pete? A massively expensive one-off payment for Logic Pro that would make it prohibitively expensive and would reduce the user base. What's Logic Pro on Mac is £170 here in the UK, and
like $199, $299 Australia. Yeah, we get screwed in Australia, by the way. $299 that I paid for Logic Mac.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Which, I mean, for the desktop market is absolutely fine. It's actually one of the cheaper DAWs that you can buy on Mac or on desktop. Yep. And on iOS, I mean, it's just a completely different market, and that would be far too expensive, I think, as a one-off payment. A lot of people, you hear the argument that they would rather pay a one-off fee and own it. Yeah. You don't own apps that you buy from the App Store. You're paying for a license to use that app. So, I mean, you don't own anything. Whether it's subscription or not, you will own nothing, and you will be happy.
There's your soundbite. You own nothing, and you will be happy.
I mean, I don't want to say it's not as bad as it could be, because that's not necessarily a positive thing. But I mean, for $5 a month for a complete recording package with some of the most in-depth features of any iOS DAW is a steal. And if you were to go back, when I first started making music, 2009, 2010, if I could have got my hands on something like this for £5 a month, I would have taken your hand off. And I'm more than happy to pay it now.
It's a great point, because our expectations have, we've got really high expectations. And I think because, and rightly so, look, who doesn't have subscription fatigue? I know I do, from the Disney Plus to your Netflix to your Hulus to your Apple ones to your everything, your Google and YouTube Premium, which hopefully you have. Otherwise, you're probably seeing an ad right now. Wouldn't that be good if I played an ad? But the subscriptions thing, I get it. I get people's passion about it. But like you say, when it comes to software, when it comes to digital items, we've seen so many times that, you buy a movie digitally and then that movie service goes out of business, and guess what? You own nothing. You buy a piece of software that uses online verification, and that online verification service goes away, and suddenly you own a piece of software you can open and not actually use. So yeah, you are buying a license. And I get it. I know we're from the days where you buy a piece of gear, you buy a piece of kit, and it's it's a physical hardware item, like I'm looking down at my mixer right now and your audio interface and your microphone, yeah, you own them. No one can take them away from you. Unless, of course, they drop a firmware update that completely bricks your mixer. But we won't talk about that. That's definitely never happened to me in the past. But yeah, it's a very valid point, and I think that as this magic technology that we have that we now have to pay for, it's amazing. And I'll go out on a limb here, Patrick, and I'm going to make a controversial statement that people are probably going to start commenting on before I even finish this sentence. But without the subscription model, there would be no Logic Pro for iPad 2. They would not have, because it's convenient timing. If you want to put the cynical glasses on, you could say, wow, 11 and a half months into a 12-month subscription model that they gave you a 2-week free trial on, they launch a giant update that will encourage you to keep your subscription. Yeah. They're a business, they're smart, and they're going to do that. So I don't think they're not going to come out and say, hey, we've just launched a great new update to ensure that our services business doesn't lose a whole bunch of revenue. But that's exactly what they did. But if they sold it to you for $199 a year ago, would we see Logic Pro for iPad 2 yet? I almost guarantee you no, because there is no incentive for them to continue getting new subscribers and retaining their current subscribers.
Boom. Drop that mic, Pete. Drop that mic.
No, I like it. I just bought it. It's my Rode Pod mic. It's very precious to me. All righty.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, subscriptions, love them, hate them. And the thing is, and you and I know this because we run in the similar forums and we see our comments all the time. And, I was chatting to you the other day about this offline, and I said, look, these days, I'm like, it's not going to be for everyone. You do you. And that's kind of the way it is, that there are plenty, absolutely plenty of apps out there that don't have a subscription model that can help you make really great music. And despite the fact that you and I are GarageBand and Logic Pro till we die, use what works for you. There's plenty of stuff out there that you can use that's not Logic Pro or GarageBand, and we're not going to stop you. So maybe just go and bug the people on those other channels, perhaps.
Yes, please.
The chords track, Patrick. This has been, I think this is the game changer. I've put game changer next to the chords track because as someone, I know you're sort of in the same boat, makes indie music, rock music, singer-songwriter style music. Having a lack of a chords track, I've found in GarageBand and Logic Pro for the last 7 years since I've been doing this, I've found every way under the sun, from using the markers to renaming regions to you name it. I've tried everything to try and get some sort of arrangement view in Logic Pro and in GarageBand. But having a chords track is one thing that I've always wanted, and now it's here, and I'm actually super excited. But I don't hear a whole lot of hype on it from other folks just yet. Is it just that Stem Splitter is so cool and everyone's all about that? The session players are so cool. What do you think of the chords track? Have you played with it much?
So I'm going to need you to explain to me why it's so good, Pete. I don't think it's bad or anything. I can see if you're going to use the session players and you need them to follow a certain chord progression, then fantastic. Outside of that, why is it so good?
That's a really, yeah. See, now you put me on the spot because now I'm like,
sorry.
Yeah, you're right. No, you're right. See, the thing is, I probably could just keep using the Marcus track because I don't use virtual instruments to play my chords. I just wanted to have the chords in there. No, that's not true. I think from a songwriting point of view, there have been times. So here's my example. Right, I'm writing a song, and then I realize I've written a song, but the melody I want to sing is outside of my range. So I want to capo my guitar up to the 3rd or the 5th fret and play it there. And then instead of me having to go in and change things, I can just grab the chords, I can change my key, and suddenly the virtual instruments on the bass and the keys will suddenly play another little ditty that's going to be 5 semitones up for me so that I can play along to that. Look, you've made a really good point because, and this is why I get you on the show, to dash my hopes and to just destroy my happiness. No, but to put some realism behind it because, you're actually right that if I'm not using those bass and keys in my finished product, maybe I'm not going to be using the chords track as much as I thought. Have I been sold by the hype?
I was hoping you were going to explain something incredible that I missed. Oh, right, okay. But genuinely, it was like, this is kind of cool, but will I use it outside of this? I don't know if it highlights the need for a proper, like a section track in Logic, because there isn't. I know there's been some rumblings in these forums and websites that this is a big missing feature, but I think that might actually be accurate because, I think... yeah, I don't know if if the chord track takes the place of that
It really
somewhat.
doesn't.
Maybe,
Yeah,
but
you're right. You're right. It's crap. What am I talking about? No, you're right. Having a sections or an arrangement track like we have to be able to move things, because that's the other thing. You're right that it would be great. Like in GarageBand iOS on my iPhone 6s, when I was writing songs and I wanted to move one verse to the second verse and the other verse back to the first verse, I could just grab the sections and move them, and I could do that 7 years ago.
yeah,
And I still can't do that in Logic Pro at all, apart from splitting everything right down into two chunks and then grabbing it and moving it across and then delicately moving everything back. So you're right, arrangement or section track. Am I starting to sound like all the people I've just been saying that I don't?
no, Pete, no, you're not. Definitely not.
No, I do think it's cool though. Like some of the cool things with the loops are good. So I think loops are actually going. So if you are a musician that's doing loop based music or doing sort of electronic music or bringing in Apple loops, that is going to help because actually being able to see, because that's been a big criticism a lot of people have had, is that they bring in an Apple loop or a loop arrangement and they're like, I've got no idea what chords this loop is actually playing. So I think some of that might be useful to be able to bring it in. But yeah, I'm clutching at straw, and this is why we have these conversations because, yeah, maybe it's not as good as I thought it would. I'm gonna have to go and re-explore that and reevaluate my life in general, I think.
Sorry, Pete. I feel bad now.
Well, how about folks watching this? You let me know. How do we use the chords track? Is it going to be the next best thing in Logic Pro? But yeah, to be honest, my favorite part. My favorite part of the chords track is that I can plug my MIDI keyboard in and I can play the chords instead of having to type them in. And I thought that was the biggest novelty, but it's just so fun to just go C, G, D. Okay. Let's talk about some more fun stuff then. And edit. So, a lot of people have been talking about the iPads, and because this is Logic Pro for iPad, what do you think about the new iPad launches? Because, we didn't even have time for you and I to get together and talk about these new iPads because Logic Pro came about so quickly. But we have the new iPad Pro, for those that weren't watching along, we have the new iPad Pro with M4 and the OLED displays, and that's about it. Everything else is pretty similar. We have the new iPad Air, which is, let's be honest, last year's iPad Pro. And we've got this great new hardware. Are you looking into this sort of stuff? Are you looking for an upgrade? Do you think an M4 with 2 terabytes and you can lay down $4,000 for something like that anytime?
Remortgage my house, sell my child, maybe, yeah. I made a video on this over on the GarageBand Guide where I essentially said the M4 is fantastic and it's great, but you probably shouldn't buy it if you're predominantly making music. I mean, certainly with the M2, I barely come close to scratching the ceiling of any kind of pushing it to its limit or anything like that. So with the M4 again, it's a lovely bit of engineering, fantastic iPad. You if you get it, you're not going to regret it, I don't think. It certainly seems like it would be super duper fast and would take anything you throw at it on. But I mean, it comes down to iPadOS, really, doesn't it? I mean, it's kind of limited by the software. I mean, as much as people are kind of looking towards WWDC to see what big changes Apple are going to make to iPadOS, again, I don't think you should be buying something like that based on the possibility of what might happen in the future. As it stands right now, it's kind of hamstrung by the limitations of iPadOS, I think.
So true.
I like the iPad Air. I think that's probably still the one that people should go for. If you want to buy a new iPad from Apple for making music on, you should probably go for the iPad Air. I kind of wish they put Face ID on it, but still, because obviously the whole thing with the iPad Air is it's the last year's processor with some of the fancy Pro features stripped out, so it's not got Face ID. No, it's a 60 hertz screen. It's only got one camera. Oh no. But yeah, so I mean, if you want to buy new, that's the one to go for. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know. If you've got an M1 iPad Pro, I'm not sure you should be thinking about upgrading. Really, that's probably still going to do you okay. I know you've got some feelings about that, but it's an interesting one. It's big again, big marketing push. Obviously, it's lighter, it's thinner, it's great. Apple, fantastic, but
Yeah, and look, I was talking on a show this week about exactly that to say that I know people get frustrated by this and at the risk of being an old man yelling at clouds, but that's what people are probably tuning in for. Did we need it to be 2 millimeters thinner, or could they have added in, oh, I don't know, another USB-C or Thunderbolt port, or and look, I know the headphone jack's never coming back, but we can dream, can't we? But yeah, like or the battery. The battery is the biggest thing because they've actually reduced the size of the battery because the processor is more efficient, so that they could make it thinner. So instead of just leaving the same battery and then going, oh, we'll give you 14 hours instead of 10 hours, they've gone, no, people expect 10 hours. Oh, we can put a smaller battery in there because the new chip's more efficient. Okay, put a smaller battery in there. So I don't know who was asking for it to be this thin, but then again, I'm not the $2 trillion company that knows their market much better than I do. So there's obviously people, and as we've seen with the iPhones over the years, like the reason that the iPhone went from sort of square to sort of curve to sort of square to sort of curve to sort of square to sort of curve is because you always want to be able to see that you've got the new model. So if they didn't make it that thin, then the people that buy it that don't put covers on it, that walk around showing people that they've got the new iPad Pro M4, no one's going to know that they've got the new iPad Pro M4 because it won't look like the new iPad Pro M4. So that might be a bit harsh on some people. That maybe you do really need it. I think the only caveat I have there is that, as we mentioned before, the AIification of things and the fact that Apple are putting a lot into machine learning. Well, okay, a year ago, Apple called everything machine learning before everyone started using AI. Now they've basically just gone Control H and gone machine learning and AI and done a full find and replace, and it's gone do, and now they say AI because everyone else is saying AI, so they're saying AI.
It's
so
hilarious. That's exactly what they've done. It's like they flicked a switch, and so they've said more. They've said AI more in the last 2 months than they said in the last 5 years. It's crazy.
It's 5G all over again. Yeah, the supercuts of 5G from a few years back are now going to be supercuts of AI. But it's no different if you watch the NVIDIA, if you watch the Google, if you watched any of these launches that they've done in the last sort of 3 months. AI's everywhere. But I do think that if they are using that for a lot of these things, so a lot of these plugins like Chroma Glow, which I didn't even have on our list here, mate. Oh, there's a new plugin too. It's called Chroma Glow. Maybe I'll add that to the list. We'll talk about that real quick in a moment. But they've added these new AI features, the session musicians, the stem splitter, the Chroma Glow. My only concern is that if they keep adding to that, if we get a guitar player, session musician. We'll talk about what's next at the end here. But if we get more session musicians, if we get more AI-based things, if we start having things like I want to see, such as the chords feature being cool because you can actually bring in a song and it will auto-identify your chords. Now we're talking. If all that uses AI, then maybe the M2 and even the M4 processors suddenly become more of a requirement than they are right now. But 100% agree with you. If you're using GarageBand right now, buy the iPad 10, like buy the 10th gen iPad, because that thing will crush your GarageBand recordings, no problem at all. And if you're on Logic Pro, the M1 iPad Air or M2 iPad Air or Pro is going to be absolutely exceptionally good for you for at least a few years, unless you want to dabble in every brand new AI feature that maybe they launch in Logic Pro 2.1. We'll be sitting here. It'll be just like the time where you were on the show and I said Apple will never release Logic Pro on iPad. There, I said it. I'm going to say now that, Apple will never do that. No. So the minimum iPad you'd recommend in Logic Pro, so M1 still, that would be what you'd tell folks?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest surprise of the whole thing, was that they continue to support every iPad model that the first version of Logic supported, which I have an iPad 8th gen. It's a 32 gigabyte model. I can't install Logic Pro on it after the last iOS 17 update because there's not enough space on it. So while that model can't even install, can install Logic Pro, but can't install any sound packs. If I wanted to use the session, because I had a big plans of doing this is the base model iPad, and this is how the session players perform on it, and it doesn't fit on the iPad. I can't download anything. So despite that being officially supported, you can't really use Logic on it. I maybe understand why they didn't. They probably should have just said, right, Logic Pro for iPad 2, M1 and up only, same as Final Cut. I can understand maybe why they didn't do that, because they want to kind of, like we said earlier, have as many people as possible use Logic Pro, but you're going to have a very, very bad experience if you've got a 8th gen iPad trying to use Logic Pro. I tell you.
Yeah, you're right. Because what is it? 30, I think 33 gigabytes for all the sound packs when I was
Yes,
looking the other day. So yeah, if you got a 64 gigabyte device, more than
even a
half of your
64.
device. Yeah.
Yeah, even a 64 is pretty much a no-go
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
Logic now. Once you
No,
start
because
adding in third-party AUV3s and stuff like that, you're just gonna
so
not have
you've
space.
you've made me sad again, mate. Because
Sorry.
I was gonna nick up
Oh
my
no.
daughters have an 8th and 9th gen iPads respectively, but they're both 64 gig, and yeah, there goes that video idea for me too. So okay, so
Sorry.
that's right. We'll handball it out. Anyone in the community that has a 128 gigabyte iPad Gen 8 or Gen 9 that wants to
Try.
do this, be our guest, because apparently neither Patrick nor I can actually do it. So
No.
Chroma Glow. Have you played around with the new Chroma Glow plugin? So this is the new, for those that don't know, this is the new plugin released as part of Logic Pro for iPad 2. It's an outboard hardware, what would you call it? A limiter, a distortion, an exciter, a compressor. It's kind of like going through and rubbing your music in the dirt, but at the same time making it sound radio ready. So what do you think of Chroma Glow?
It's a saturation plugin, Pete. It's a very good saturation plugin, but it's a saturation plugin. I said this on one of my videos. Okay, it's all kind of blurring into one at this point. That it's kind of very much doing what Chroma Verb does, in that it kind of makes a lot of third-party. Chroma Verb makes a lot of third-party reverb apps obsolete. You don't need it because Chroma Verb is so
Verb's so
good.
good.
And Chroma Glow is kind of doing the same thing for saturation plugins as well.
Yeah.
It's quite CPU heavy, and it's added by default when you load up a bass or a drum session track. So I got a bit of a fright on my M2 iPad Pro when I loaded up kind of as I think maybe 5 or 6 session player tracks, and the CPU started to kind of spike into the red, and I was like, oh my god, how taxing have they made this? But it's because every track had also loaded up an instance of Chroma Glow as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know what's AI about it. Does it automatic? I haven't seen it automatically change in response to what I've put it onto. I've kind of changed the settings and things like that. But I mean, you maybe have had. I know you've done a video on it specifically. Have you had?
Yeah, I mean, I did do a video on it, and to be honest, the video I did, I was honest, and I said this was probably when I read through and when I first opened up when we had the early access. I said this is the least thing that I'm the least excited to look at because it looks like a saturation plugin.
It's good, but
yeah, and I loaded it up, and I'm like, this is a saturation plugin. But I think what's good about it, like since then, I've become not a complete convert, but I think it's good because a lot of people don't really understand how important some sort of distortion or saturation is on their digital recordings, because digital is so clean, and you've heard them and I've heard them. People produce music and you're like, that's great, but it's too clean. Like, it's too good. You're using gear and you're not actually adding any harmonics or anything that's going to make it sound more natural. And hey, for some types of music, that's probably fine because they don't want it to sound old school and analog. But for our old man ears, we need to hear that little bit of grunginess and that little bit of edge to a vocal and that little bit of snap to a snare drum. And I do like, I've been playing with the presets, and my tip for anyone playing with Chroma Glow is throw the presets on. And I don't know how this is AI because this is Pete I. This is just me going, I'm putting it on drums. I'll press the drum button. PI. All it's doing is dialing it in the settings for the type of instrument. But you're right. Wouldn't AI be you press detect and it says this sounds like a snare drum that needs a little bit of extra sort of mids, so it's going to add that for you on like by itself. So I think the AI comes into but modeling outboard gear, hasn't every plugin been doing that? I mean, again, don't want to be critical, but haven't we been using impulse responses and emulations of outboard gear and emulations of analog gear for a decade or so now? So again,
Apple marketing again, isn't it? So they have to talk about everything as if they invented it. And like we say, it's not a bad thing. It's not a dud or anything. No. It's great, but it's maybe perhaps not everything they talked it up to be at length in the presentation. So
I think yeah, it is great though, because if it, again, I know we always sound like we're talking really good and then really bad, and that's because hopefully we come out balanced at the end of the
yes,
day, because
yeah,
we're not going to just tell you everything's buttery smooth and use all the superlatives in the world. You can go watch the official stuff for that, but we will tell you when stuff's good and when stuff's maybe a little bit overhyped. And yeah, I think this is just in the right sweet spot, because I think if you've never used a saturation plugin in your life, you don't know why you need it. If you just put a preset on, it's going to sound better in most cases than if you didn't put it on, which is why it's going on by default. So maybe that's the AI that,
yeah,
you know, when you change your bass patch, it puts the Chroma Glow plugin on there to make it sound better.
maybe.
That-
I mean, having said that, it's probably one of the things that will get used most, because it is just like, from a utility standpoint, it's just so usable on everything. So
Yeah, people will be using it even if they don't know that they are. Because
Yeah.
who looks at those plugins? Man, have you put a patch on sometimes and it adds 7 plugins and then
Yeah.
creates 4 buses for different things, and you're like, I just wanted to play a drum sound and now you've
Yeah.
completely changed my project. But thanks.
my iPad is on fire. Oh my god. Yeah.
Oh, mate, we could talk for hours, and no doubt will in the future as we continue on for iPad, Logic Pro for iPad 2.01 and 2.1 and 3 and
3
who
next
knows
year,
what's
yeah.
3. Yeah, well, yeah, they have set themselves a very high bar, Apple, that we expect May of every year an entire point update for Logic Pro for iPad. I was chatting to a Logic Pro for Mac user the other day, and I'm like, so jealous much that you've had Logic Pro 10 for how many years, and you've finally got 11, and we had Logic Pro for iPad 1, and less than a year later we have number 2. Pretty fun. What is next, mate? What is coming next for Logic Pro for iPad? If you want to get your crystal ball out and gaze into that, where do they go from here? If you're Apple, what's your next steps over the next, 6 to 12 months?
I mean, I think my completely original suggestion that I didn't hear you say 10 minutes ago would be a session guitar player, Pete. No. It's interesting. I'm not sure where they can go, really. I mean, you would want, as much as we talked at the top of the show about how good it is that Logic Pro for iPad is its own thing, I would like to see some of the kind of really good features from Logic on Mac make their way across things like, was it Smart Pitch? What's it called? Flex Pitch.
Yeah.
As much as the pitch correction plugin in Logic Pro for iPad is great, having that kind of fine control would be fantastic. MIDI Learn, I think it's become increasingly obvious that they need to add that at some point pretty soon, because people are losing their minds that for some reason they can't press play on their attached keyboard and have the transport controls respond on their iPad. Things like a score track. So I've had a few people say since launch, obviously in Logic Pro, in the editor, you have the option to switch to a score view that isn't present in the iPad. So having features like that added would be great, I think, as opposed to shiny. I mean, the shiny new stuff's great as well, don't get me wrong, but having kind of functionality that existing users will appreciate would be good as well, I think.
Yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, look, I let the cat out of the box. Bag? Where do you keep cats?
What are you doing to your cats, Pete?
Don't have any cats. But apparently, I think we keep them in a box or a bag.
In boxes in your garden.
Buried in a box. It got dark. It always gets dark when we get together, mate. We must be getting towards the end. So guitar session player, I've heard people talk about it, and to be honest, if there's one weakness across GarageBand, Logic Pro for the last 10 years, it's been guitar sounds, and I get it. Guitar sounds are hard, but they're not that hard. We see a whole bunch of external VSTs and AUs that we can use on desktop that have great guitar sounds for whatever reason. On iOS, we've just not had great. I mean, yes, there's a few plugins and apps that do an okay job, but I don't know. If you can do it with bass and you can do it with keys, if you're modeling stuff like they've been doing, like the upright bass is a pretty complex model that they've put into that bass player. So surely a Stratocaster guitar can't be that much more difficult to be able to do the same sort of thing.
I think so.
fingers crossed we'll see a guitar. That four seems good. Like to have four different musicians, 4-piece bands, four
Yeah.
musicians. I don't know that we're getting a vocal. Someone was saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if they did a vocal AI thing?" And I'm like, no, then it's just going to sound like Udio and all those AI generated voice things. But
They are popular. That would be quite interesting for them to
that
add
would be
in.
interesting.
A total gimmick, but it would be quite interesting.
Oh, if you could do that, if you could just put your own lyrics in there and just have an AI singer sing them for you and play along with your other session musicians, my goodness, it'll go next level. But yeah, no, I honestly think so. And here's the thing, I'll sort of finish on this. I loved music memos, a little app called Music Memos that you might remember and some folks might remember. So Music Memos, you grabbed your guitar and you played in an idea. And what Music Memos did is it used not AI or machine learning. It just analyzed what you played, worked out what the chords were, and then played a drum and bass along with it so that you could capture ideas on the go, just like a voice memo, but you could then instantly add the chords, the bass, and the drums. And as soon as I saw that session players were coming, I thought, beautiful. It's finally what I've always wanted. It's Music Memos Pro. I'm going to be able to queue up a track, play in my guitar, it's going to know the chords, and then it's going to play keys and bass along and drums along with my chords. It did everything except the one thing that I wanted, which is to analyze and put the chords in. And there are apps that do this that don't need fancy AIs and don't need machine learning that can just listen to chords and work out what they are. Do they get them right perfectly every time? No, you have to edit them a bit, but I'm baffled that that is not a feature. And yeah, I'm going out on a limb to say that it will be a feature soon, even if I have to, email Apple and put a bug report in, just going, still don't have chord analyzing features. They're like, Pete, this isn't actually a bug. This is a feature request. No bug, no chord analyzer, and I want it there. So
I've got this email from Pete Johns.
But then again,
Tim Cook. Right.
That's the thing. That's me. And I think that the one thing that perhaps if you go up a few levels, like in the corporate world, they call it like 30,000-foot thinking, where you're looking at everything. We are like blip. Like for everyone that's using iPads and everyone that's using Apple products, as much as I hate to say it, the music creation community, we are pretty small. We are a little microscopic community. And does that mean we're not important and we don't matter? No. But does that mean that a business and a company that needs to, deliver value to shareholders and make profits and do all those things is going to do exactly what we say and want all the time? Also no. So I'm also realistic. I'm realistic but hopeful. So hopefully that doesn't come across as pessimistic or optimistic. I'm neither. I'm realistic and hopeful for the future. But I don't know. I love it. I love the new Logic Pro features, and I love playing with it, and I love making music, and Song Timber's around the corner, and I'm going to really enjoy putting that chords track to use or not, because you've crushed my hopes and dreams on
no.
that. We'll find out. That's the thing. I haven't created the whole song using Logic Pro for iPad 2. I don't know that you've created the whole song using Logic Pro for iPad 2. Until we do that, I don't know yet, because it's all just trying out these new features now. So the proof will be in the delicious gooey music puddings that we all create. I'm getting hungry now.
Yeah, lunchtime.
Mate, what's happening for you around the GarageBand or the GarageBand guide and the Logic Pro guide in the coming weeks and months? More content on this new update?
Yeah, absolutely. So Logic Pro Guide, yes.
Pro guide. That's the easy one to pronounce.
Oh no. Yeah. So talking about these new features, we've got a video coming out. The Logic Pro for iPad a year later, which is in a few days. That might not be exactly on the day.
Or about now by the time this video comes out. So there you go. Check the description.
Sorry if I just ruined the facade of...
Nah, we're only pre-recording a couple of days out, mate. People know how this stuff works. We're professionals.
So I have a video coming out a couple of days in the past. If you're watching this now, on the GarageBand guide, telling people why they don't need Chroma Glow and offering alternatives that they can use
to Chroma
in GarageBand, for free.
See, this is why you're smart, mate, because you bat with both hands. You're like a left hand, right? You're like, here's why all these new features are amazing. Logic Pro hit it out of the park, and then you're like, and here's why if you got GarageBand, you need none of this crap. and then you smack it from the other side. So, no,
100%.
it is good. And it is true. Like, again, I'll reiterate what I said earlier, which is that if you spend more time worrying about what you don't have and what these things don't do, maybe just reconsider that and realign and work out what you can do right now to make music and share music, because that's what we're really all in this caper for, is to create and record and release and share music. So yeah, don't stress too much about what you do and don't have, because there's plenty of ways to make great music. And if people want to make great music and they want to check out what Patrick's got on offer, head over to either the GarageBand Guide or the Logic Pro Guide. I got through it. I nearly messed up there too.
Nice work.
Logic Pro Guide. They are both down in the description of this one. You can also find links to all of the stuff and the ways that you can keep in touch with me and Patrick on the YouTubes and the websites and all the rest of the stuff. Any parting words for the podcast listeners and viewers, Patrick?
No, thank you very much for having me on. Always a pleasure, Pete.
Lovely. Love talking and geeking out and nerding out with you about Logic Pro for iPad. Thanks, everyone, for watching. As we say at the end of each and every show here, please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, keep creating, and we'll see you next time right here on the Studio Live Today podcast.